Welcome to the Major Project Podcast, your inside look at the high-stakes world of billion-dollar projects.
Welcome to the Major Project Podcast. I'm your host, Orion Matthews. What does it take to grow 7.5 million trees across the capital city? We're welcoming Jovita Stander to the podcast for an inside look at Green Riyadh, a $10 billion mega project that is set to transform the capital city of Saudi Arabia into a green oasis. Jovita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Orion, for having me. And it's really a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Today, I think our goal here was to talk a little bit about the Green Riyadh project, which is also part of the Vision 2030 initiative. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit for us and just tell us about this sort of mega initiative and then mega project inside of that initiative.
So I think it is important maybe to explain Vision 2030 before we talk about Green Riyadh, because that is forms part with a lot of other projects, forms part of the Vision 2030 that was launched in 2016 by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And the goal of Vision 2030 was really to diversify the economy and get also the economy away from the oil-based economy. And so Vision 2030 encompasses a number of projects, and one of them is Green Riyadh. So how Green Riyadh fits into Vision 2030 is because as goals, Vision 2030 has, one of the goals is really healthy lifestyle, also to increase the life expectancy from the population from 74 to 80 years, and increase, interestingly, the population's rate of weekly exercise from 13% to 40%. So that's quite a sort of a big jump, yeah. And also to have 3 of Saudi Arabia's cities amongst the top 100 globally. Together with that, which is obviously close to my heart, is a part of Vision 2030, is really to increase the representation of Saudi women in the workforce. So that is also one of their goals. And so Green Riyadh, when we start talking about it, will then fit nicely into Vision 2030.
And then before we talk a little bit about Green Riyadh, which I believe is the largest reforestation or tree planting project ever completed, maybe could I get a little bit about your background, kind of how you got into project controls, and maybe understand a little bit about your career path?
Thank you. Yes, I currently fulfill the role of Project Control Director with Knight Frank, which is a global real estate consultancy firm. And before that, I was a Project Control Director on Green Riyadh, like you said, the biggest afforestation project or urban afforestation project in the world, with the aim of planting 7.5 million trees in the city of Riyadh. And so that's quite exciting to be talking about Green Riyadh in a few moments. Just also a little bit about me, because that will fit into also the discussion about project control. Project controls led me to work in a number of industries, amongst it urban landscape afforestation, mixed use, high-rise buildings, transportation and rail infrastructure, power, oil and gas, export terminals, and then the mining sector. And it also led me to work in a number of countries across the world. So South Africa, where I'm originally from. So please don't, confuse my accent with like Australia, because
Australia, yeah.
Yes, normally people say, "Are you from Australia?" No, South Africa. How can you confuse our accents? But anyway, so besides South Africa, also Angola and Mozambique in the African continent. I've worked in Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and also in a lot of states in the US, because I was in the US for 5 years before coming to Saudi Arabia. So that is part of, the life of projects and also working in project control. And I think that gives me the ability, all these diverse industries and countries, the ability to adapt to new environment, teams, multicultural, different languages, cultures, and so on. And also just a little bit about me, I'm really a problem solver. I bring order to chaos. And I think project control does a lot of that. It brings order to chaos. And I enjoy working on projects just because it's got like a start and a finish date, whether that's 1 year, 5 years, but I know that, at one point this will come to an end. And then I can move on to a new adventure because really I'm a gypsy at heart. So I can't sort of stay in the same place doing the same thing for a long time. So that really helps me in terms of my personality and my FOMO of fear of missing out. So I think I've chosen the right career, or it chose me, I don't know, but that's a little bit about me and just a little bit about project control, but we can go into a little bit more detail during our session.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that background. That sounds like quite a trip and a travel. I'm super curious to maybe have you on again and talk about some of the other places that you've been and some of these other projects too someday. Well, so let's turn our attention to Green Riyadh, which is an incredible project. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk about it is that I think most people, when they think about $1 billion plus project, they think of a construction project. And I think that this is this is a construction engineering problem, but planting trees is a non-traditional multi-billion-dollar project. So I'm really curious to tease out some of the differences and hear the story. So maybe, just introduce us a little bit to the project and maybe take us to the intersection point of when you perhaps got the call that you were going to take this on.
So I think before I start talking about Green Riyadh project per se, maybe I can just, bring project control, numbers, percentages and things like that. So just talking a little about Green Riyadh, because some of the information that I will share about Riyadh city, some of the information that I will share about Riyadh will then make it better, easier to then understand the project and some of the goals of the project. So Riyadh city in 2022, the population was around about 7 million people, and they forecast that by 2030, the population of Riyadh will be 9.6 million people. And what's interesting also about this 9.6 figure is that 4.1 million are Saudis, and then the rest, the 5.5 million, are actually expats from all over the world that work in Riyadh. And I think there's probably no country that's not represented here. That is just, for me, it's just interesting. And then there is really between 2022 and 2030 with the forecast around about 38% increase. To bring it into perspective, between 1974 and 1992, the population increase was 8.2%. And now we're looking at an increase of 39%. And which also then has an effect on the real estate market in terms of housing. And the housing demand between 2024 and 2034, so 10 years, is 305,000 new housing units. So that sort of, gives you an idea in terms of the size of the city and the population and what those housing units are also going to do in terms of infrastructure and why we also need that for Green Riyadh. And Green Riyadh city, in terms of economy, there's a lot of infrastructure projects and then services in terms of financial services, digital economy, and biotech. So that is one of what drives the Riyadh economy. So Green Riyadh, like we mentioned, is one of the most ambitious urban afforestation projects in the world. It was launched in March 2019, and which for me is actually quite a nice date because my youngest sister's birthday is actually on the 19th of March.
Nice.
And like we mentioned, the goal, one of the biggest KPIs of Green Riyadh is the 7.5 million trees that needs to be planted across the city. And that includes neighborhoods, parks, mosques, roads, side streets. And so really it is, even public facilities like and education facilities, universities, and so on. Also, the valleys, what we call wadis. And the other day I've just driven through one of the wadis, Wadi Anifa, and it's beautiful because there's a lot of routes for cyclists and pedestrians, lots of trees, and it's really very, very pretty. And that you can see people exercising now, sort of at the end of the day, and it's just beautiful. So it's like a little green strip through just beside the city. Just also out of curiosity, the Riyadh city actually lies in between two wadis, and one of them is Wadi Anifa. Just for interest's sake, wanted to mention that. Now, the other thing that's quite interesting, and that's why why I said, the population and the housing units, why it needed for Green Riyadh is because Green Riyadh, for the irrigation of what we call green assets, so it's trees, not only the trees, although those are really probably the most important KPI, but the other green assets are shrubs, lawns, and so on. There's the irrigation will be done by using treated sewage effluent water, so the water that we drink and then undrink, and is a whole network of water for irrigation, and that is around about 1,300 kilometers of irrigation network throughout the city. And so this treated sewage effluent will be used, 100% of the irrigation will be this type of water. And what's interesting is in the beginning when there was the study for the project and what was needed. So part of the irrigation and the amount of water that would be needed was calculated on the amount of population, because how much grey water does X amount of people generate? And so the calculation was based on that. And so the population, if it decreases beyond a certain number, which I don't know what that number is, it will have an influence in terms of the irrigation, the water for irrigation. But with the growth of the population, the projection for 2030, I don't think that would be a problem. I think there will be excess water so they can actually plant more trees, if they wanted to do like a phase 2 or 3 of the project.
That was going to be one of my questions. How did they choose 7.9 million and not just say 8? Was that a...
Yeah, I just need to correct myself. I said 7.9, but it's actually 7.5. I think it was just the studies. Yeah. And also because they wanted to achieve, and we can talk about some of the objectives or the outcomes of Green Riyadh project, it was to achieve a certain amount of shade, which then, or what we call canopy cover, so that certain other things could be, because the KPIs of Green Riyadh is not only planting the trees, but there are other KPIs. So, for instance, dropping the temperature of the city by 1 to 2 degrees. That is one of the KPIs. The other KPI would be to increase the quality of the air. For instance, anybody that has been to Riyadh will tell you that the traffic is just terrible. There's lots of cars on the road, and that's the traffic is a big source of frustration for anybody using the roads. And so one of the things is to reduce the carbon dioxide between 3 and 6%. So there's better quality of air in the city. Something else that the project wants to achieve is the capacity of the city to absorb rainwater. And people might be like, rain in the desert. Yes, there is a season which is in winter, over sort of November to January, when it actually rains. The rest of the time it's really dry. And, when it rains, people are so happy they actually go out, out of the offices and so on, and they actually film or take pictures of the rain. And I just find that beautiful because, for me coming from...
So when it rains, does it just mostly run off, or is there like a groundwater source? Okay.
So it runs off, but so now the city, to be able to capture that resource, there's a lot of emphasis also on stormwater drainage and stormwater management so that they can actually capture that water as well and then use it for irrigation. And of course, then also preventing floods and things like that. Then the other thing about the project is also to enhance the aesthetic view of the city. Sometimes when you drive through the city and you're still driving through some areas that have very little trees or no trees at all, and then the moment, you move into an area where there's already some greenery and so on, it is actually so nice just to see that a little bit of green, because the area here in Riyadh, because of course, the natural let's say landscape, it's very tones of browns and light beiges. So you're always seeing that tone of color. And so the moment you see something green, it's nice on the senses, and I think it probably lifts your mood, if at least it lifts mine. So coming from South Africa, lots of greenery, so it always lifts my mind. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is that with Green Riyadh, also because of Vision 2030 in terms of healthy lifestyle, there's a lot of parks, even small parks, being either developed or being planted more greenery, so that people in the neighborhood are basically at a maximum of 300 meters away from a green space, to encourage people to go out and to have that the lifestyle. Those are one of a few things that I just wanted to mention about Green Riyadh.
So can you break this down? Like, I think I heard 3 major components. There's probably more, but it's sort of planting, canopy, and then there was a major sort of stormwater, sort of industrial project, and then a third, which was sort of creating spaces, parks, recreational space in the city. Is that kind of, those were your 3 major scopes? Was there anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so these are sort of the main things. Of course, based on that, let's say just if we take the canopy cover, that has got then other benefits like reducing the temperature, for instance, and the aesthetic vision of the city, right? And then with the stormwater is really to harness the rainwater, and that then has got not only that you are using that resource, but then you're also preventing other issues that might have occurred in the past, like flooding. And so there's always, there's a lot of off-front benefits, let's say, from the project itself.
Okay. And so then, all right, so I think I understand the scope. And then you got the call to join this project as the project controls project manager, director. What was the title specifically? Because you were the director.
Project control director, yes.
And so when did you intersect it? Had you just sort of FID'd into execute? Like, where within the project did you then intersect? And kind of, can we take us back to that moment? Because that's a big order to get all of that built. Yeah. It was $8 billion budget, something like that?
I think at the time that I joined, putting Saudi Riyal back into dollar in 2023, I think that was around between 10 and 11 billion US. Yeah. Okay. So going back in time, I was actually sitting in my house in Katy or Houston, Texas, when I got a call, and out of the blue to say, look, we're looking, this is sort of the project. We're looking for a project control director. Would you be interested? And I did a little bit of research, and then I ended up here. Now, the project, they talk about Green Riyadh project, but in actual fact, the project is a program. Just because of the different types of typology projects that they have. So you've got roads, which is linear. You've got neighborhoods. You've got parks that they need to start from scratch. And the park is not just a park. It's almost like a smart park. So there will be retail. There will be routes for people to walk. There's some entertainment spaces. And then Saudi is a very digital country. And so there will be other things as well that people can connect and so on. So it's not just a park in like when I was growing up as a kid. So, and the parks are very, very big. Some of the parks actually have a stadium in
Wow.
it,
Okay.
or forms part of the park, and there's a lot of connectivity with metro, with other things going around in that area. So the parks that Green Riyadh looks at, some of them are very, very big, and then within the neighborhoods there are sort of smaller parks. So that is why I'm saying it's rather a program because of the different types of projects. And within, let's say, if we take the WBS that says neighborhoods, there's a number of neighborhoods, and not all of them can start at the same time. So the projects, when I started working on the project, the different projects were in different phases. So some were almost being completed because there was like a portion or pilot project that encompassed a few roads. So that was starting towards completion of the project and the handover phase. Some projects were still in design, and some projects were just started. Some projects are just in the planning phase, and they might be going out to tender now, for instance. And I must say, it was great that it was like this, because I think if everything was in execution or was all at the same phase, we as project control would probably have a hard time being able to monitor and control all the projects. So it was actually good that it was staggered, and also because it's such a big program and it touches the whole city. I think this was the correct approach, because you can't, let's say for the network, the water network, you can't dig up the whole city for the network. I mean, it will just be one big chaos, right? When they install the network, there's planning in terms of, okay, now we're doing this, or maybe we're doing 2 or 3 portions of the city. So I think this was the right approach in doing it. We don't talk about phases, but we're talking about, let's say, priorities in terms of the various projects.
And then, just to like back up for those that are more 101, can you explain what the role that you had was doing and what your team might have looked like for the project?
Okay. So that was quite interesting. So project control, you've got your traditional things in project control. So when you talk about project control, irrespective of the type of project or industry, normally it will be planning and scheduling, cost, more monitoring of the costs so that you can get your CPI for the project, your cost performance index for the project, and so on. Then normally document control will be part of project control. And then depending on the organization, I should say, then risk also forms part of project control. Then I've worked on projects or with companies where the contracting and the commercial portion of the project also fell under project control. Here in Green Riyadh, when I worked on the project, I had the scheduling, I had document control, cost, risk, fell within sort of my domain. Also project control that I didn't mention previously, but project control in terms of the reporting, that's also normally part of project control. But then I also had the GIS team. And we can, because GIS was used for planning, and that was actually quite interesting, and we can talk about that just now. And then what I loved is that I had the graphic design team also within project control. So for me, dealing with like schedule and numbers and stuff, that was nice because I could use a little bit of my creative side with the graphic designers, because they produce beautiful presentations and sometimes brochures for the parks, for instance, because a lot of times the leadership of Green Riyadh needed to do presentations to other stakeholders. And so, that was quite nice. It was, I think every project control team should have the graphic design under them. I'm just going to say that. So I
think a lot of times I kind of think of that. Well, there was like a really good book written by Cole, I think Nesebar. Anyway, it said Storytelling with Data is the book title. And it's really eye-opening because it's sort of like a story of form over function. It's like you can have all the data you want, but if you don't have the storytelling ability with that data, it just sort of falls apart. So having a
Yeah.
graphic design team at your fingertips can really I think can be the difference between being able to sort of get what you want done and not, even if you have all the right KPIs and all the right metrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when you're talking the whole time about figures and percentages and this, that, and the other, if you can represent that visually, like through an infographic, through a nice graph, we use, of course, a lot of graphs, S-curves, and so on, but maybe just presenting it with slightly different, I don't know, colors or something like that, just refreshing it, I think it makes it so much easier for people first to understand the data, and then it makes it easier for you to deliver or to tell the story around that. And the graphic designers were really fantastic in what they did. So I really have a lot more respect for graphic designers in terms of how they can take this data and in one page just represent it, and everybody understands. Like one picture is more valuable than 1,000 words, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you also have permitting as part of your sort of domain, or was
Yeah, so
permitting handled separately? Yeah.
permitting was dealt with through the stakeholder managers. There is, of course, I'm not going to say that I understand all the permitting aspects here in Saudi Arabia and what is needed and so on. So the stakeholder manager looked at that, but the permitting was definitely an activity on the schedule. And so the permitting didn't necessarily fall under us as project control, but we were certainly aware of it and made sure that everything was in place. Also because, I mean, it's quite strict in Saudi Arabia. You can't start excavation if you don't have an excavation permit or a building permit and so forth. So all of that needed to be in place before anything started.
And so then let's just talk tools then, because I really want to talk about the GIS part. You kind of hinted that there's some really interesting stuff there. It sounded like, were you doing your progress of the project in GIS? Were you doing it in P6? Kind of what was your main set of tools that you were working with to execute the project?
For scheduling, Primavera P6 for sure. And then the GIS, GIS Arc, I can't remember now. You'll need to help me. You'll probably know more than me.
ArcGIS, yeah.
Yeah. So the two databases spoke to each other. Now, with GIS, and why GIS was so important is because at the end, the trees and the green assets will be mapped back to GIS, and we can talk about that just now. But in terms of the schedule and GIS, so GIS had a code for each, let's say, a mosque, a segment of a street, anything that we needed to know where there was going to be either a tree, a shrub, or a ground cover. Each of those little assets had a code, and those codes would then tie back into P6. So if I had a neighborhood A, and in the neighborhood I had 10 mosques that needed greening, and I had, let's say, a main road and the segments of the road, all those codes from GIS would be shown in P6 for that particular project. And so it was then, and of course, each of the mosque or the segment of the street and so on had then cost also associated with it. So there was a lot of, the two databases needed to speak to each other. And so if anything changed, let's say, for argument's sake, that there were 10 mosques, but they decided only that they were going to do only the one mosque, which they call a Friday mosque. So the mosque is only used on a Friday, which is the holy day for Islam here in the Middle East, and not the other 9 mosques, let's say, which is your weekly mosques. Then that would change, and then that needed to be reflected back in P6. And any updates that we did in P6, that, this has been completed and so on, then would also reflect back into GIS. So there was a lot of making sure that the code was correct, and then, using it back between the two databases. And what I was just going to say in terms of the codes, if then there were like 10 codes or 20 codes used for each of these little assets within the neighborhood, all of those codes would show on P6, so that we could always relate back. It doesn't matter which database you were using. And also GIS was used also as a planning tool, in the sense of, let's say that they needed to green a wadi or a portion of the wadi. GIS helped us to make sure that the borders were properly delineated, so that we knew exactly which portion of that terrain was our responsibility for greening. And maybe because there might have been a little portion that was like in private ownership that we couldn't go into. So a lot of that was used. And if there was any uncertainty, then either the GIS staff or the stakeholder manager would then go and speak with the municipality, let's say, and to make sure that that portion that we identified, was it in private ownership or not, or who was the owner, so that there was no issues around about that. So GIS really helped quite a lot, and it will help even more when we talk about the green assets and what the plan is with GIS.
Well, so, and about those green assets, like how do you decide if you're planting like 7.5 million trees, what trees are you planting? Like who's in charge of your trees? And like what, is that everything from a shrub to a giant, look, I'm imagining these giant conifers. Like, tell me a bit, how did you manage? Was there a university involved that was like picking trees? Like, how did you sort all of that out?
So with the green assets, the project, one of the departments is the tree management office. So on the organogram of the project, we've got facility management office, we've got the construction management office, a project management office where I sort of fitted in, and then amongst other things, also the tree management office. And there was a whole study done in terms of native trees. So everything needs to be native to the region. Also looking at green assets that are heat resistant and requires very little water. And you can just imagine with the heat that we have here, the moment you irrigate, the evaporation also happens very quickly. So it needs to be plants that would adapt, or then from the region. And a whole study was done. Not sure that universities were involved, but I can also not think that there wouldn't be universities involved. But the tree management office had a company that was really had done already a lot of work for many, many years in the area, and their resources, so the human resources that they had, were landscape engineers, but also then a GIS staff and other technical staff. So within that, they were looking at, which is quite interesting to say, we need to plant 7.5 million trees. They identified, if I remember correctly, 72 species that are native to the area. A lot of acacias, which are like thorn trees. We also get them a lot in South Africa. So for me, it was actually quite nice because it was something that I recognized. Of course, palm trees that are native here to the area. And so they were looking at that. And I mentioned earlier about the canopy cover. If we can interchange some of the species still native, we can still achieve the same canopy cover, but with less trees. And so that might be something that the project will look to in future. So it could be that instead of 7.5 million trees, it's only 7, because by using other species still native to the area, the canopy cover can still be achieved. The same KPI can still be met. And so that maybe doesn't answer your question like directly, but that is how the green assets are looked at. And then, of course, the shrubs, if need be, sometimes some of them don't quite adapt for some reason. So there's always study to see if anything needs to be changed or enhanced in terms of the species of shrubs and ground covers, and then, of course, the trees.
Wow. Okay. So I'm thinking here, you picked up the phone, you said, I'm going to do this. You took the job as project director. And then when you got there, how did you establish the culture you wanted for the project and sort of go about sort of setting things up for success? And then perhaps that could lead into another question, which I have, which is kind of like, what were some of the big challenges on this project as well?
So when I arrived, I think this was the first time in my life that I had the all-male team. And I was the only senior female in terms on the project. So as project control director, I had to do all the monthly meetings, the weekly meetings, and then His Excellency, the chairman for Green Riyadh, we had to do a presentation to him once a month. And again, I also had the honor to do that. And standing in the boardroom, it was like a sea of men in front of me. And
wow.
it was fine. I'm just mentioning it because this really was the first time in my life ever that there was no other female in the boardroom. So sometimes it could be a bit intimidated. I don't know if they were intimidated by me, but maybe it was both sides. But it was just interesting, to be in a position like that. So one of the challenges that I did find in terms of the team is some of the team members were very open and I had no issues. Others were very reluctant and really did not accept my authority, my position, and they would really sometimes either circumvent or just blatantly ignore any request or things that I asked them to do or in a way that I wanted them to do it. So I think there was a bit of a challenge in their mind that I was challenged in terms of, do I know what I'm talking about and do I have the experience? So I had a little bit to prove myself to them because, sometimes in project control, there are different, you can do the same thing in different ways. And because I come from, let's say, the Western world, there might be a different way that we do things, and here maybe people are more set in their ways just because they don't have the experience like I did in working in different countries with different cultures and so on. So those were some of the challenges that I faced with the team. And how I overcame that, I think the first thing is with kindness. So I had an option to assert my authority in terms of, this is me, you are going to do what I want you to do the way I want you to do it, or I could try do it in a more subtle way, because and I do think that if you sometimes try and do it in a more, let's say, pleasant way, you gain more in the long run. It might take you a little bit longer. It did take me a little bit longer, but I thought that was the right course for the environment where I was in, and also because I realized that for them, it might have also been the first time that they were reporting into a female. So I had to take that into consideration as well. And maybe they didn't know quite how to handle that. I think kindness, trying to understand as well. A lot of times I had to really bite my tongue and just maybe just take a walk and, just cool down. But I also had to have a balance in terms of firmness, still with respect, because I cannot always try to accommodate and, go the long way and bring people in and so on. So sometimes I really had also to put my foot down, always with respect, but say, look, we've now debated this, but this is what I would want you to do and go in this direction. I worked a lot with the team in terms of a lot of times we were a lot under pressure. And so if the team was working late, and sometimes we actually worked through the night to finish a presentation for the next day, I would work with the team. So I would always be the last one going home. I would never leave before the work was finished. Also making sure that, if they were working late, that there was small things, like let's order dinner. And what would you like to eat? Everybody ordered whatever. The one guy said, oh, I want sushi. I said, order it. No problem. And that was a bit of a challenge because here sushi is expensive. And he was actually quite so surprised. And he said, okay, you'll order it. They did it once and they never ordered sushi again. So small things like that. But also I try to understand the human element. And I think that for us as leaders, as people managers, we must never lose sight of that. And I'll explain to you why. Most of the people, the men here, the families are back home, whether that's India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, the Philippines, and so on. Yes, there are some of them that do have their families here, but a lot of them don't have their families here. They see sometimes their family once a year, depending on, also the level within the company, because obviously the airfares are expensive. So depending on their salary bracket, some see them more frequently, but, the wife and the kids are at home. So, if there's sickness or there's issues at home, they can't be there and they need to have their head in the work when they're at work. So you also need to take that human element into consideration and a lot of things that might be happening that, it's not apparent. So if there was low productivity or if, there was an issue, I would always try to speak to them, understand if there was a personal thing going on and how we could then, work around that. And the one thing, and that's just something that I always do with my teams, is really recognizing good work and giving credit where it's due. And it was also something that a lot of them were not used to. And the first couple of times that I did it, people were very surprised. But I think that buys you as a leader a lot of miles in terms of just recognizing the good work that people do and then also giving the credit and not taking the credit for yourself. So those were just a few of the challenges and, how I worked around those.
I'm trying to think too about maybe what are your tips for people that might have to go into a presentation like the ones you had to give? It sounds like there were not only as a female, it's very like, how did you prepare for those first few? And then also just in general, if you're the project director, those are really high stakes meetings with really high level people. And do you have any tips for like, how did you pull those off? What would you say is some advice there?
So first of all, fake it till you make it. No, I'm just joking. So, okay. So the one tip that I can say is you can never be prepared enough. Prepare. So what I would do is we would have the presentation. Of course, I was involved in the presentation, so I had the data in my head. We would discuss the data, make sure it's accurate, and so forth. So it's not that when I went into the presentation, it was like the first time that I was seeing the PowerPoint presentation. But for me, I would print out the presentation for myself and I would make notes on the presentation, things that I had to remember, things that I wanted to emphasize. If there was a problem, for instance, design was late. Why was the design late? Because, as project control, you need to give an overview of the whole project from where they are doing maybe design competition through design to where they are handing over. And I mean, I'm not necessarily an expert in any of those fields, if you understand. I'm not the designer. I'm not the people building this or planting the tree. So for me, I made notes so that I wouldn't forget things that I could refer back to. And that is how I went into the meeting. And I had Post-it notes all over my pages with things that I wanted for me as reminders, different colors. And I knew what the colors meant. And that was it. And if I was asked a question in the presentation and I didn't immediately have the answer, I could refer back to my notes. And if it was a complete sort of out of the blue question that I really didn't have the answer on the presentation in my notes, I think we just need to, we don't need to know everything. And I just had to have the courage of my conviction to say, I don't have the answer for you now, Your Excellency, but I will get it to you as soon as we finish the meeting and I will make sure that you get it. And I think there's nothing wrong in doing it. It doesn't diminish you as, the presenter in any way. And I think instead of, trying to fudge it and, trying to make things up or trying to remember and maybe not giving accurate information, I think you lose more credibility than just saying, look, I don't have it right now. I know we do it, or maybe I can just text my colleague that's sitting outside and they can start working in getting that information to you. And there were a couple of times that we actually did it. And the person said, look, if you can get it for me now while we're in the meeting, that would be great. And so I always had my project control manager, extremely capable gentleman. He was always like on standby. And so I could send him a WhatsApp and say, we need to have this. And he would start working on it. So I think those are things that you can put in place to help. And the other thing that I also did that I think is very important is I would take a presentation and I would practice out loud at home, because you need to feel confident with the words. You need to feel confident with the data that you are speaking. And so those are things that work for me. Maybe people have got other tips, but that is what I would do. So practice and have additional information with you, and have no issue in referring back to notes. I can't remember everything. Any project is normally so big that you need to refer to other data.
Well, and I think you kind of touch on this with that, which is like, the word lie is too strong, because I don't think people really overtly do that sometimes in project reporting, but oftentimes they'll sort of weave and dodge questions or obfuscate. And that
yes.
is so frustrating, I think, for leadership. And it really erodes credibility so quickly. But it takes a lot of courage to not weave and bob when you don't know the answer, or you're trying to sort of there's a natural instinct, I think, that humans have to please people. And we want to tell people what they want to hear. And it seems like maybe being able to tell people what they don't want to hear, whether it's, I don't know this, or your project's going badly, is a real skill that you have to develop in that role.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right, Orion. And, for me, it's very difficult. When I'm under pressure, like I'm presenting, right? Now I'm already under pressure, and I'm an introvert by nature. I've learned mechanisms to cope with that and to work with that. So in the spotlight, I'm not in my natural element. So I'm already under pressure, and I can't think like on my feet immediately. And because the nature of project control is to deal in facts. If you say it's 54%, it doesn't mean it's 52%. It is 54%.
Right.
You can round it up a little bit, if it's like 53.9, right? So for me to give any information, whether it's cost or schedule performance or anything like that, I need to I need to be sure of the facts that I'm saying. And so if I really don't know, if I'm not sure, I would rather go and verify it and then give the information. And you are right, sometimes it's a bit daunting to say, look, I don't know, because maybe people are scared to think, what are people going to think about me if I don't know this? But I think it's better to do that. And of course, immediately then, as soon as you can provide the information to the person, I think that really works better. And it works for me. So hopefully it will work for others as well.
Well, so this is an interesting question about, like, you really do need to know your facts in project controls. I feel like I've been in situations or talked to people that have, you're like, I'm getting this data from a vendor and I know it's wrong. Like, I just know this is probably not true. Or like, how do you do that QC on the data that you're getting on this project information to make sure that you do have the right facts? Is that like a culture that you have to establish? Is it having the right data systems? Like, what do you find is the right way to get information and facts?
Yeah. So, of course, as project control, we get information from different departments within the project. Construction project, the design, construction department, the design guys, the financial guys, and so on. Now, I think what is important in terms of project control is that you need to have processes in place. And when I talk about processes, I'm not necessarily referring to everything that, the bells and whistles and all the technology and so on. You need to start with the basics. And the basics is cutoff dates. so that everybody reports to the same cutoff date. So in Green Riyadh, that was something that I needed to implement because everybody's cutoff date was different. End of the month, last day of the month, 2 weeks before the 25th of the month, and so forth. So we had to establish that so that everybody reports to the same date. If there was an exception, because at one point we had to make an exception for the construction guys because they received information from different PMCs, project management consultants on different projects, and they didn't have enough time. So their cutoff date was, let's say, a week before the rest, but we knew that, so we could take that into account. So in order to do that, you then publish a project calendar with the cutoff dates so that everybody knows what's going on. Also, just as a sidebar, for me to implement that in Green Riyadh, first it took a lot of explaining and convincing, getting buy-in from the different teams so that we could then do that. And that probably lasted about 2 months until we actually implemented a project calendar and everybody then started reporting to the same date. We had some delinquent departments, and that just with reinforcement, eventually everybody got on board. That would be one of the things. The other thing is to ensure that when you look at the data from 1 week to the other, the progress, does it make sense, right? So if you're jumping X amount of percentage in a week, does it make sense? The same with the cost. So we didn't always get it right, of course, but I think you start getting a sense this doesn't look good. And if that is the case, then you need to go back to the source and you need to ask them, look, are you sure about this data? Can you just explain to me how did you come to this? Because I just have a feeling that it doesn't make sense to me. So just explain to me. And sometimes just by talking to somebody that provided you the information, that might just trigger something, and they might say, oh, maybe we I don't know, it was, we've got one extra digit there, or maybe something went wrong. So I think if something is nagging and you've got that gut feeling and even if you can't put your finger on it, rather go back and check. So I always used to say to my team, please think about things. If you're looking, don't just assume that it is correct, because we also make mistakes. So other people are also going to make mistakes, right? Just ask. And then even if everything looks good, just do some checks and balances and go back or bounce it with somebody else in the team. Do you think this is correct? So those were some of the things that we did. And then the other thing was we needed to report weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then yearly. And this is also just something I think for the audience is to say, is there a golden thread through your 3 weekly reports that will then feed into your first monthly report? And, so if you take the monthly report and you deconstruct it, will it talk to the third week, to the second, and to the first week? And so I think having that kind of data and making sure that golden thread walks through your data, it's one of the things that you can put in place to make sure about data accuracy.
Well, so you mentioned that it's really the basics. And I think that's something that I would just like to sort of underscore or hear your thoughts on that, because I think a lot of people think about project controls and the position you're in and are thinking that you have some advanced tooling or some magic kind of stuff. And when you talk about make sure you have regular meetings, establish a date that everyone can align to, these are really simple activities, kind of like when you go to someone and learn to do a sport like running. It's it's not about the shoe or the type of outfit you're wearing. It's you need to work on really basic things and get your steps right. And just the basics are hard. So I'm curious where you sit with that. You sort of mentioned that it's the basics. I think getting the basics right is really hard in project controls. Curious what you think.
Yeah. So I think today with AI technology, a lot of software that we can use, all of those things are wonderful. But when you implement that and your basics are not right, it comes back to the old thing, garbage in, garbage out. And then if that, the input and the whole process of the monitoring, controlling is not right, then it doesn't matter everything, these wonderful tools that you have, because then the data that is going to put out will not help the decision makers of making good decisions for the project. And so I think, so for me, when I go into a new project, I always make sure that are the basics correct. And then I can look at PMIS systems, at AI, at dashboards, and all of that. I already mentioned in terms of a project calendar cutoff date. People, I think, know it, but maybe they don't say it. But project control is all about routine. It is routine. Every month in those 30 days, something has got to happen at certain points in that month. And then next month, you repeat it. So project control is about routine, and the more routine you have, I think the less that you are open for error, because you know that at the end of this week, I need to get input from various departments, and that will then go into my reporting next week to the client. And if you are on top of your data, you can immediately get an idea if something is off in terms of other under or over performance, for instance, and you then have a chance to go and check that. So the accuracy of your information is really important. And I think that is the sort of the main thing that you need to know, that you need to be on top of in project control. Yes, the schedule needs to be a realistic schedule. You need to have good planning. All of that needs to happen. But in terms of project control, in terms of reporting, you need to make sure that your data is accurate. I think also project control, when I say a project is chaotic, I don't mean it in the sense that nobody knows what they're doing and, this whole chaos and mess. And so it's not what I am trying to say. But if you look at the big project, there are so many moving parts. There are so many departments that need to provide input. Everybody's doing something at any point in time on that project. And with project controls is the hub in getting all this information together. And so if you don't have good controls in place, good processes in place, it can actually become chaotic. Then you've got like huge amount of data, but you cannot necessarily do something meaningful with the data. And I think that is a big challenge for project control, is having those processes in place so that when you get the data, and assuming it's accurate, you can do something with it. The output will be beneficial to the project because of decisions that are made based on the data that project control puts out. So once all of that is in place, and you know that the information that you're getting, the process that you've put in place, then you can start looking. Then go for the dashboards, go for all these wonderful tools that are out there and new ones that are being developed now in terms of AI and so on, and then and use it, because I mean the goal is really to be more efficient and being able to provide data, accurate data in a very short amount of time. So I think and that's fantastic to have that on a project, especially the big projects that we work on. But the basics, those maybe boring things, that the processes, all of that needs to be in place before you can then take the next step.
That's super helpful. And just to switch gears on you a little bit, thinking about, we're giving a lot of tips to experts in the space. There might be a few people listening here that are maybe in college that are looking at what you've done, or they want to break into this industry and they're like, I want to be you. I want to have your career, want to run big projects someday. I feel like our industry is very niche. And so I'm curious if you have some advice for people that would want to do that. Like, how would they get started? How could they make that happen for themselves?
So, Orion, I'm glad that you asked me that. My short answer is go for it. I think in terms of maybe a little bit a longer answer is I think a project control, you've got various career streams within project control. And I will share with you sort of a little diagram in terms of the various, let's say, streams, and that forms part of project control. And then how you can, if a person wishes, they can actually move horizontally and then go up again. So for instance, I'm just going to give an example. So let's say a scheduler. He might love scheduling P6. That's all he wants to do, become a subject matter expert in terms of P6 planning and scheduling. And that's fantastic because we do need people like that, subject matter experts. They know the program very, very well, the depths of their knowledge in terms of the software, and then all the practical experience as well. And so that would be sort of a vertical stream, and you become the person sort of within the industry, and you are the subject matter expert. Now, I'm just saying, for my personality, I like to do a lot of different things. So I would never become a subject matter expert because I don't want only to focus on one thing. But I'm going to take this planner again as an example. He's done planning. He's reached a certain level, let's say a senior scheduler, but now he wants to know a little bit more about risk or maybe cost, maybe even sort of in the commercial portion, let's say contract administration and so on. So he can then move horizontally and then go into one of the other streams, or then actually move completely into projects control, which is your reporting portion. But you need to know, scheduling. You need to understand that. You need to understand costs, and you need to understand, a number of things. So when you go into that, you move, and then you can go up, let's say in the project control stream, and then become senior project controller, project control director, and so on. So I think it really gives you a lot of opportunity, whether you want to become expert in your field or whether you want to become sort of more all-rounder like I am, and that you can, you've got a good understanding of everything within project control, but you're not necessarily an expert. But you can give direction, you understand what needs to happen, you know what to what to ask to get the correct answers. But if you're asking me, am I P6 expert? I am not. I know P6, I know what to look for. I can work on the program, but I can never be, and I don't want to be, an expert in P6 like some people on my team that are just fantastic, and I'm very grateful to them. So I think project controls does afford you a lot of opportunity, whether you want to work on different projects and travel different industries, or whether you just want to stay in one type of industry. But I think a lot of the skills that we learn in project control, you can use over a number of industries. Of course, if you go into a new industry, let's say you're moving from mining to urban afforestation, there might be, you will need to learn the lingo of that industry or of that type of project. When I move, let's say, from types of projects of industries, I actually do a lot of research. So just an example, when I landed in Texas in sort of midstream oil and gas, I did a lot of research. I didn't know what a pumping jack was. I mean, I knew, the picture, but I didn't know it was called that. So I just went and I learned a lot of things about the industry. And for me, I'm an eternal learner, and I think in project control you need to be that. You must always be learning something, and you need to know things about the industry that you are currently working in, and I think that's just a wonderful thing. So keep on learning, and I think any person choosing project control, I think it's going to be a very blessed career and very adventurous, I think, and it will definitely broaden horizons.
Okay, I just want to go deeper on one little piece. So if you're a scheduler, scheduling is a very focused, rigid, specific, mathematical-based concept. And you explained earlier that, you need to establish a data date, which is more of like a convening, almost like if you're going to be the conductor of an orchestra. And there's this moment where all the instruments aren't playing right. They're like, "Brr," at the start, and then they'll kind of raise their hands and everyone stops and then they like even it out. And I feel like that's a really specific skill. And sometimes when people move from like, I was a risk manager, I was doing costs, I was doing schedule, and they step into that project director role, they can't get the band to like cool because they miss that day-to-day thing. And then things kind of start to spiral, and then maybe they're just managing chaos at that point. How do you learn that skill?
I think that part of it is about the person's personality. And so, like I was saying, I don't want to be an expert in anything because it doesn't fit with my personality. So I get bored very quickly. And so I like to do a lot of things and be involved in a lot of things sort of at the same time. And so I think that is one thing that a person would need to consider if they want to become, let's say, a project control manager or director, because you need to be able to talk to the scheduler and understand what's going on. You need to be able to talk to the risk manager and somebody that's looking at cost as well. And I by no means say that I know all the calculations that they do in the cost and what, but I need to know what was the budget, what is my actual cost right now, and what is the forecast, what is the cash flow. Those are the basic things that I would need to know and be able to understand in order for me to work with the cost of a project. And I'm simplifying it a little bit. Of course, there's a little bit more, but those sort of are the basic things. It depends on the personality. And I think some people, I'm just thinking about the risk manager that I worked with, excellent risk manager, very knowledgeable, extremely passionate about risk management. And you could ask him anything about risk and risk management and methodologies and that kind of thing. He was absolutely passionate about it. Would he be a good project control manager or a project control director? In my opinion, probably not, because he was so passionate about risk and that was his whole focus. So I think it comes back to what you were saying. So when you get into a project control manager or director role, you need to step away from, let's say, that focused approach and only looking at one thing. And you need actually to have a very wide view of everything that is happening on the project and everything and how things fit in. I think people that want to go into project control, the broader thing of project control, I think just ask yourself, do I want to be doing a lot of things, be involved in a lot of things at the same time, or would I rather feel more comfortable in just focusing on one thing? And, I know I'm a scheduler, I love scheduling, and that's what I'm going to do, or risk management. So that is a question that people would need to answer for themselves. And maybe the answer that you get today, as you also mature in your career, get more experience, and you as a person become older, that changes. So it's not something. So if you have an answer today, doesn't mean that over 5 or 10 years it will still remain the same answer. It could be, but sometimes things change, and people get other interests. So I think it's just something that somebody would need to ask them constantly, or every 5 years, is this still what I want to do? Just focusing on one thing, and vice versa. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And I know we're running out of time. I just have one last one I guess I would love to touch on. I feel like we're really blessed to have you share your story of leadership as a female. And I think in this space, and maybe this isn't true everywhere in the world, but at least the projects I've been involved with, I'd say engineering is somewhat of a more heavily dominated by male folks. Even here in America, it seems like a male dominated field to some degree. And I'm curious if you could share some tips for women that are going into this space or possibly in this space. And then, your story is so profound that you've navigated that space, and then you've also navigated in an area that's really, part of that Vision 2030 project. So maybe just if you could share a few more tips for any women that might be listening here.
Thank you for that. And I think it's quite interesting to think about that and talk about it. So I think for most of the world, engineering construction is, like you say, more a male dominated space historically, and I think in the Nordic countries it's sort of balanced, basically 50-50. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for for women in this industry. And I think the one thing that's important, I think, to mention is that women have a different way of leadership style, of addressing problems, also how to solve problems. It's not that how the men do it is right or wrong, or how we do it is right or wrong. It's just different. And I think with that, it also brings positive, because like I said at one point, there are different ways of doing things or solving problems, the same problem in different ways. I think also with that, women are starting to get more into the STEM fields and also in construction. And I think we sometimes bring a little bit, maybe a softer approach. I don't know how to phrase it differently. And we still get the same results. That doesn't mean that we cannot be assertive, that we cannot be firm when it needs to. And of course, we do need to have that. So I would think that, and my advice would be to any woman that is thinking going into the field, I would support them and I would encourage them to do that, because I also think that we as women also learn a lot. I have found that for most of the part, I've always been respected. I didn't really have issues coming into the field as a female. There were some challenges, of course, with male colleagues and also just in general with the industry. But I think that is changing. And I think you never need to apologize, for sort of being a woman in this field. But I think you need to learn how to cope with certain things in the industry. And also, you cannot be easily offended. I think if you're, how can I say, very fragile, or you get offended easily, or you get hurt easily, I think then, you might want to reconsider this. So, yeah, I think you need to know that sometimes you will need to be quite firm and assert yourself. Yeah. There's a couple of times that I've lost it a little bit, and that also sends sort of a message, and then things were okay. So I think, I don't know, I'm very happy. I've been very, very blessed in this career. And I would, if I had a choice, I would do it all over again. So I hope that is an encouraging sort of message for the ladies out there that are considering coming into this career.
Well, I hope so too. And I guess any final sort of thoughts about tips for people, any books that you've ever read, things that you think might be really good for people to know? And if they want to get in touch with you, how could they do that? You have a LinkedIn, things like that.
Yeah. So to get in touch with me, very easy. I think Jovita Stander, I'm probably the only one on LinkedIn. So look me up. I'll be happy to connect with you. Also, I think my contact details are on my LinkedIn profile, but Orion, I can also provide those if you want to share it. So, and I'll be happy to, if somebody wants to talk to me about the career or any specific tips or issues or anything like that, I'll be more than happy to do that. I think also, just as a last tip, I think I wanted to also to mention that if you are coming into the field, into project control, into scheduling and so on, get yourself a mentor, in the sense of go to somebody that is already experienced and ask them, will you be my mentor? Can I come to you if I've got questions? Develop those relationships. Even today, I mean, I've been working for many, many years. I will still go to somebody that I think, or to various people that I think know more than me in a certain area, and I will bounce ideas off them. I will ask them sometimes for advice. I would not, and that doesn't mean that I'm weak, that I don't know what to do. But sometimes when you discuss the problem, when you get other inputs, it makes your final decision better than, before you did that. So you had a decision, you thought you were going to do it, but sometimes with the inputs, then it makes it better. So if you're coming in and also throughout your career, find yourself good mentors that you trust and that can advise you, whether it's technically, whether it is, I need to go and do this presentation. I'm struggling with this portion of the presentation. Can you just hear me out? Do you have any tips? So things like that. And when I ask for help, nobody has ever said to me, no, I'm not going to help you. So people are eager to help other colleagues succeed, and just find yourself those people in your career, and that will be a blessing for you and for them.
What a great way to end it. And Jovita, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. I have learned so much about Green Riyadh. I will include more details. You mentioned that you might even have a little career chart. So we'll put everything below this video, a few links for people that want to go a little bit deeper and learn even more about the project. Thank you so much for coming on, and really look forward to the next conversation. Hopefully we'll have you on again to talk about another major project.
Orion, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure talking about this and speaking to you about the project and my career. And it's been an absolute blessing and joy to be here today. So thank you so much. And I hope really that there's something worth for the audience to take away.
Thanks for listening to the Major Project Podcast. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and learn more at themajorprojectpodcast.com. Until next time, keep building big.